If your client's grant projects keep running long, it's usually not because of your writing process. It's your onboarding. Because the writing started before you agreed to the scope, the project parameters, and the timeline. And when you draft while inputs are still missing, you don't just edit later, you actually rebuild. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the minimum information you need to collect and confirm before you write a single word of that grant draft. And it doesn't matter whether you're a freelancer, consultant, an in-house grant writer, or a nonprofit leader trying to get an application across the finish line, this will still apply to you. So here's what I want for you by the end of this. I want you to leave with a simple intake framework you can use for any grant, so you stop chasing details mid-draft and stop absorbing preventable rewrites. Now, before I go over the checklist, I need you to hear one thing. Most one more revision moments aren't actually revisions. They're late arriving information. Maybe the budget categories change, the program numbers change, a partner's role changes. And then my personal favorite when working with a client, the real decision maker, reads the draft for the first time near the end of the process and says, "We would never say it like that." That's not editing, that's rebuilding. And the good news is you can prevent a lot of that if you treat intake like part of the writing process before you even start drafting. So let me show you what this phase needs to include. A good intake process does three things. One, it helps you collect the right inputs in the right order. Two, it forces the key decisions to happen early because decisions shape the narrative. And three, it creates one source of truth, so you're not drafting from email threads and documents titled Final File. So here are your three non-negotiable rules for intake. Rule number one, onboarding is not a call. A kickoff call can be part of onboarding, but it is not the work of onboarding. The work is collection, confirmation, and setup. Rule number two, no drafting until you have a minimum viable packet. You can outline, you can ask smart questions, but if outcomes, budget, staffing, or partnerships are still unclear, drafting is just guessing, and guessing becomes rewriting. Rule number three, there is one source of truth, one place in your system where the current versions live, one place where questions get answered. Because if your inputs are scattered across emails, texts, and drives, you will inevitably write from the wrong version of something. Now that we have the ground rules, the framework, here is the checklist itself. I organize the intake checklist into categories. And as I go through each one, I want you to ask yourself three questions. What am I collecting? What does this prevent? And what do we do if it's missing? All right, category one, funder fit and application requirements. What you're collecting is the guidelines or NOFO, the scoring criteria, and any FAQs available from the funder. And if your organization has applied for this grant before or with this funder before, you're collecting past submissions and any reviewer feedback. What this prevents is the classic mistake of writing a narrative that does not match how the application is actually going to be evaluated. So if they offer scoring criteria, put that in your documents before you start drafting and draft around it. Do not guess what they care about. If they don't have scoring criteria, they have language on their website. You might be able to attend a webinar beforehand. You might be able to speak directly with someone at the foundation. And finally, you have their past 990s to see what they really fund and what they really care about. Now, once you know how the grant will be judged, the next category is what determines whether your draft moves or stalls. And this category is access, timeline, and scope approval. Here you're collecting the primary contact and backup contact if you're working with a client. You're confirming the real deadline of the grant, plus your internal draft dates and review windows. You're getting access to the application portal if there's an online system, and you're choosing where the files and questions that you have will live. So that's your singular source of truth. Then you lock in your scope, the deliverables, what's out of scope, who approves the narrative versus the budget and attachments, what counts as revision and how many will you do, and what happens when inputs are late. What this prevents is stalled drafts, scope creep, and surprise stakeholders. And this can apply to both consultants with clients that they're writing for, as well as in-house grant writers who get a last-minute surprise from their executive director about what's expected for this grant. And if you realize that any of this info is missing, you don't start your draft. You lock in the logistics first and then get the approvals confirmed in writing. Because if you don't have that locked in, your timeline isn't real. Okay, once those logistics are set, We need to do something most teams skip. We need voice. Category 3 is the organization's story and voice. So here you're going to collect the current approved mission and program descriptions. You're going to ask for 2 to 3 sentences if you're working with a client on how we want to sound, and you capture specific language preferences like required terms, terms to avoid, and any community language guidance. And if you're in-house, then you should already have this stuff, but if you don't, make sure you get it now. What this prevents is the "this doesn't sound like us" rewrite loop. So make sure you collect this before you start writing the narrative, because if you draft before you know and understand the voice, you will be rewriting most likely. Next, we have the category that determines whether your evidence of past success, goals, and outcomes is compelling and based in reality or vague and totally made up. That category is program evidence and numbers. Here you're collecting the program model, what happens for whom, how often, and where. You're collecting outputs and outcomes and how they're measured. If evaluation summaries exist, you want those. And you want 1 or 2 approved participant stories or examples, of course with permission. What this prevents is writing claims that reviewers can't score. If this category of info is missing and you yourself cannot gather it, then you write a list and decide what on that list you can responsibly claim moving forward versus what you need to assign to someone else to collect. Now, even if your narrative is perfect, there's one more place where the project can still fall apart: the dreaded attachments. Our final category is the attachment packet, so you're not chasing PDFs right before the deadline. Your baseline packet is usually going to include things like your IRS determination letter or EIN documentation, a current board list, a 990, maybe a W-9, an organizational budget, and financial statements, depending on what exists. Then you're going to add in what's required for this specific funder, of course, policies, plans, reports. You keep this on hand for every single grant application, organized, and you know that it is the most up-to-date information. Then you're going to add in, of course, what's required by this specific funder: policies, plans, reports, other materials. And what this prevents is the deadline day PDF scavenger hunt. So although this is at the end of this list, you should not be doing this right before the grant application is due. You're front loading all of this into your onboarding process, because the upload work always takes longer than people think. Sometimes maybe you need a resume and someone's like, "I haven't had a resume in 10 years, and you have to put together the resume last minute? No. Let me point out something important. I'm not just giving you a random 47 item list right here. I'm giving you categories because the exact attachment list depends on the funder. But having these general categories can keep you from getting surprised at the last minute. Now the question becomes, how do you organize all of this to have it on hand and then make this a repeatable process without making it feel overwhelming? This is why we have a centralized AI system. We use our AI Grants Hub as a single source of truth for each client. So the current approved version of everything, the narrative language, the program facts, budgets, attachments, and prior drafts and successful grant applications all live in one place, not scattered across a million different folders, not living in someone's desktop downloads folder, all in one place, and everything is centralized and connected. That makes intake easier because you can standardize simple tools like an approvals form template that says who approves what and how fast, and a one-page program evidence snapshot that captures the proof points you're going to reuse across different proposals, and a standard grant narrative that captures everything that you could possibly say, almost, in a proposal, and then you can reuse and rework that material over and over for every different proposal. That's how you move faster without guessing. And if you want instruction on the tech setup, the templates, the entire delivery system for clients specifically, we teach that all inside of our course, The Grant Practice, which helps grant writers build and scale their grant writing business. Details are in the link below. All right, regardless of whether you're a consultant or a staff grant writer, here is your takeaway. You don't write faster by writing sooner. You write faster by collecting and confirming the right inputs first, and keep it all organized in one system so you know what the single source of truth is. Because when you do that, you stop rebuilding drafts from a collection of other drafts and you start delivering consistently. If you're a freelancer, contractor, or grant writing consultant, and want help figuring out your pricing so that onboarding and delivery don't quietly eat away at your calendar and your profitability, download the free Grant Consultants Pricing Playbook from the description box below. And if you want the full workflow, take a look at our course, The Grant Practice. It's where experienced grant writers turn good grant writing into a repeatable, scalable delivery system. Please like, subscribe, and share with your other favorite grant writer, and I'll see you next time.